It was supposed to be just one drink, but the way she poured it, everything between us changed. I had been in that house more times than I could count. It was the kind of place that always carried a certain warmth, suburban, modest, and filled with memories not mine yet strangely familiar. My friend and I had grown up here in different ways, he with his family, me as the guest who seemed to never knock before walking in. Over the years, I had memorized the smell of their cooking, the creak of the third stair, the way the evening light slipped across the kitchen floor. That night wasn't meant to be special. Just another casual evening, laughter echoing from the dining room as plates were cleared, voices overlapping, and the kind of comfort only a well-worn friendship can bring. But when the others drifted away, my friend heading out early with plans of his own, the atmosphere shifted. The house grew quieter, emptier, yet not lonely. I stayed behind, offering to help with the cleanup, partly out of courtesy, partly because I didn't want to leave just yet. She moved gracefully between the kitchen and dining table, collecting plates with an ease that didn't call attention to itself. Still, I noticed her. I always had. My friend's mother, 40, maybe 41, carried herself with a quiet confidence. Not loud, not demanding, just steady. Her presence filled the spaces silence left behind. And though I never said it aloud, I admired the way her smile reached her eyes, the way her hair caught the dim light, the way she seemed untouched by the passage of time. I reached for a stack of glasses just as she did, our fingers brushing for the briefest second. It was nothing, a small accident, but it lingered in my mind longer than it should have. She glanced up, a smile pulling gently at her lips, not teasing, not dismissing either, just there, as though she felt the touch too. "Thank you for helping," she said softly, her voice carrying a hint of weariness that made it all the more real. I nodded, forcing a casual tone. "You've hosted enough times. Least I can do is help." She gave me that look, the kind where gratitude and something quieter hide in the same expression. For a moment, the clink of dishes and hum of the refrigerator became the only sounds between us. Something unspoken hung in the air, something I couldn't name but didn't want to break. That was the moment I realized the evening wasn't ending the way I thought. The kitchen had quieted into a softer world once the clatter of dishes was finished. Outside, the rain had started, a light patter against the windows, its rhythm folding into the hush of the evening. I leaned casually against the counter, trying not to make the silence feel heavy. She wiped her hands on a towel, moving with that same quiet composure I'd always noticed. Then, almost unexpectedly, she tilted her head, her eyes glinting with something playful. "How about a drink?" she asked, her tone light, almost teasing. "Just one." The words hung in the air, simple yet weighted. I don't know why they caught me off guard, but they did. Maybe it was the way she said them, like it wasn't just about the drink, but about staying, about not letting the night end too soon. I smiled, feeling something stir inside me, a mix of nerves and boldness. "Only if you pour it," I replied, the words slipping out before I had time to overthink them. Her smile deepened, just slightly, but I noticed the pause that followed. It wasn't hesitation exactly, more like consideration. As if she was deciding whether to treat my words as a joke or to acknowledge the truth tucked inside them. She moved toward the cabinet, pulling down 2 glasses. The soft scrape of glass against wood sounded louder than it should have. She didn't answer right away, but her expression carried that same faint amusement, touched with something else I couldn't yet define. The kitchen lights were warm, glowing in a way that made the room feel smaller, more intimate. The quiet hum of the refrigerator became the only sound, except for the rain outside. My eyes followed her movements, the sweep of her hair as she turned, the careful way she placed the glasses on the counter. It wasn't the act of offering a drink that unsettled me, it was the undercurrent running beneath it, the sense that we had both stepped onto unfamiliar ground. I caught her looking back at me briefly, and there was nothing casual about it. Her gaze held mine a second too long before she turned back to the bottle resting on the counter. It was subtle, so subtle it could have been dismissed as nothing. But I felt it. That shift. The unspoken acknowledgement that something between us was stirring, fragile and dangerous, but alive. And in that moment, I knew that, just one drink wasn't about the drink at all. She reached for the bottle with a measured ease, fingers curling around its neck as though she'd done this 1,000 times. Yet to me, in that moment, it felt like a performance meant only for my eyes. The cork slid out with a soft pop, the sound sharp against the hush of the kitchen. My chest tightened at how ordinary it was, and yet how completely charged it felt. The fragrance of red wine unfurled in the air, rich and warm, mingling with the faint scent of rain seeping through the open window. She tilted the bottle, slow and careful, the liquid catching the light in deep crimson arcs as it filled the glass. I couldn't look away. There was elegance in every movement, the slight bend of her wrist, the glimmer of her bracelet as it clinked softly against the bottle, the steadiness of her hand. When she poured into the second glass, her eyes lifted, catching mine over the rim. It was only a flicker, brief but deliberate. I held her gaze longer than I should have, aware that the silence between us had shifted from comfortable to electric. She set the bottle down and slid one glass toward me across the counter. As I reached out, her fingers grazed mine, light as a whisper, but unmistakable. The touch was nothing, an accident, anyone else would have said. But it lingered in me, burning in a place words couldn't reach. "Here," she said softly, almost unnecessarily, her voice low and steady. "Thank you," I replied, though gratitude wasn't what I was feeling. I was too aware of how close we were, of how the light traced her features in warm gold. The faint lines of experience around her eyes, the calm steadiness of her breath, she seemed both untouchable and suddenly within reach. I took the glass, letting the cool rim press against my palm. For a second, I didn't drink. I only watched her as she lifted her own, the wine brushing her lips in a slow, deliberate sip. The motion was simple, but it stirred something quiet and dangerous in me. We clinked glasses softly, the sound ringing delicate and bright, like a secret sealed between us. She gave a faint smile, not wide, not showy, just enough to suggest she felt the weight of it too. And as I finally brought the glass to my lips, the wine tasted richer than I expected, maybe because, in truth, I wasn't savoring the drink at all. I was savoring the moment. The living room felt different once we left the kitchen behind. The lamps glowed with a soft amber light, casting long shadows that curled across the walls. Outside, the rain had gathered strength, its rhythm steady against the windows, a sound that wrapped itself around us like a blanket. We settled on the couch, not too close, not far either. The bottle of wine sat between us on the low table, the glasses in hand. For a while, we kept the conversation light, neighbors, small memories, half-hearted jokes about how many times I'd eaten dinner at this table over the years. She laughed easily, though I noticed how the laughter would trail off, her eyes lingering on the glass instead of me, as if something heavier pressed just beneath the surface. Then, without prompting, her voice softened. "You know," she began, eyes fixed on the window, "sometimes I wonder if all this effort, keeping the house full, always hosting, always smiling, it's just to remind myself I'm not as alone as I feel." Her honesty startled me. I wasn't sure she meant to say it out loud, but once it was spoken, it settled into the air between us. I turned toward her, not with answers but with attention. "That doesn't sound easy," I said quietly. She gave a small, almost apologetic laugh. "It isn't. But you get used to it." I studied her face in that moment, the faint traces of tiredness around her eyes, the way her smile faltered but refused to completely fade. She was strong, yes, but there was vulnerability there too, hidden in the silence between her words. Without realizing it, I shared more than I intended. "I get that," I admitted. "At my age, everyone expects you to know where you're heading, what you're building. But half the time, I feel like I'm still searching for ground that won't shift under me." Her eyes turned toward me then, steady and searching, as if she hadn't expected me to meet her vulnerability with my own. She nodded slowly, and for the first time, I felt we weren't speaking across generations or roles, we were just two people, caught in the same human ache of wanting to be seen. She laughed again, lighter this time, and as she did, her hand drifted briefly to my knee. A small, unconscious gesture, yet it stayed there a heartbeat too long, warmth spreading through me like fire under the skin. Neither of us acknowledged it. We didn't need to. The silence that followed was louder than words, carrying both comfort and the hint of something we hadn't dared name yet. The bottle on the table was now half empty, the wine blushing faintly against the glass walls. Neither of us rushed to refill, as though the space between sips mattered more than the drink itself. The conversation had slowed too, drifting from words into silences that carried their own weight. She sat angled slightly toward me, one leg curled beneath her, the other resting close enough that the edge of her knee nearly brushed mine. The lamp behind her cast a soft halo over her hair, catching strands of gold that shimmered whenever she moved. She wasn't looking at me now, not directly. Instead, she traced the rim of her glass with a fingertip, absent-minded yet precise, as if concentrating on that small circle helped her avoid what lingered between us. I wanted to say something. Anything. But the words wouldn't come. The quiet wasn't awkward, though, it was thick, charged, alive. It was as though both of us had stumbled into a place where language no longer mattered, where the truth existed in breath and heartbeat alone. Her hand lifted suddenly, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. The movement was quick, almost nervous, but it left her wrist exposed, pale and delicate in the glow of the lamp. Without thinking, I shifted slightly, my fingers brushing against hers in what could have been an accident. Could have been, yet wasn't. Her skin was warm, softer than I expected. The touch lasted only a second before she pulled back gently, not in rejection, but with a subtle intake of breath that made my chest tighten. She placed her hand on her lap, fingers laced together now as though holding herself still. When she finally looked at me, her eyes carried more than she spoke. A question, a hesitation, a flicker of something fragile yet undeniable. I held her gaze, steady but careful, afraid that one wrong move might shatter the fragile bridge we were building in silence. The rain outside had deepened, drumming harder against the glass. Inside, everything felt suspended, caught between restraint and surrender. My throat was dry, not from the wine, but from the weight of wanting to speak and not daring to. And in that pause, I realized something: sometimes the loudest confessions aren't spoken at all. They exist in the spaces where silence dares you to feel what words can't safely carry. The silence lingered between us, long enough to feel deliberate. I could hear the steady tick of the clock on the wall, the rhythmic pulse of rain against the windows, and the faint hum of the lamp. Everything else had faded, the world outside, the noise of the evening, even the memory of why I'd come here in the first place. She exhaled softly, her gaze lowering to the glass in her hand before she set it down on the table with quiet care. Her shoulders rose and fell, and when she finally looked at me again, her expression had shifted. The playful humor she'd carried earlier was gone. In its place was something rawer, vulnerability, honest and unshielded. "You ever feel like people only see the version of you they want?" she asked, her voice low, nearly swallowed by the room. The question caught me, struck something deep. "All the time," I admitted. "It's like no matter what you do, you're either too much or not enough. Never exactly who they think you should be." Her lips parted, just slightly, as though my words had cracked something open. She leaned back into the couch, eyes holding mine with an intensity that didn't waver. The distance between us suddenly felt unbearable, as if the couch was a vast ocean instead of a sliver of fabric. And then she moved. Not dramatically, not rushed. Just a slow, quiet lean in my direction, like the decision had been building inside her all evening. Her hand lifted, hesitating in the air before finding its place against my chest. The touch was light, uncertain at first, her palm resting just above my heart, as though she needed to feel its rhythm to steady her own. I froze, not out of fear but out of reverence. My hand found hers almost instinctively, covering it gently, pressing it closer as if to say, "I want this too." Her breath caught at the contact, and in that moment the line we had both pretended didn't exist blurred into nothing. Neither of us spoke. There was no need. Her touch said what words couldn't, that she was tired of being unseen, that she wanted, even for one night, to be felt and known. And as I sat there, her hand warm against my chest, my fingers laced over hers, I knew that we had crossed into something delicate, dangerous, and impossibly human. Time seemed to stretch after that moment, not rushing forward but unfolding gently, like pages of a book neither of us wanted to close. Her hand still rested against my chest, mine folded protectively over it, and for a long while we stayed that way, breathing, listening, letting the silence speak louder than anything we might have said. The rain outside softened again, its rhythm a lullaby against the windows. The wine, untouched now, sat forgotten on the table. What had started as just one drink had become something else entirely, an unspoken agreement that what mattered most wasn't the glass in our hands but the presence we were allowing between us. Eventually, she shifted closer, not abruptly but with a quiet certainty, until her shoulder brushed against mine. The warmth of her body seeped through the thin space, grounding me in a way I hadn't expected. Her head tipped gently, resting against me, her cheek settling on the curve of my shoulder. I felt her exhale, slow and steady, as though she was finally allowing herself to release the weight she had been carrying. I slipped an arm around her without thinking, holding her there. Not tight, not possessive, just enough so she knew she didn't have to move if she didn't want to. Her hand, the one I still held, relaxed beneath mine, and her fingers shifted slightly until they threaded with my own. That simple act, a quiet interlacing of fingers, felt more binding, more intimate, than any kiss could have been in that moment. Neither of us spoke of what it meant. We didn't promise, didn't explain, didn't try to label what had just taken shape between us. It wasn't about defining it. It was about being seen, about choosing not to pull away when the world outside might have expected us to. The clock on the wall chimed softly, reminding us how late it had become. Still, neither of us moved. She stayed there, her breath brushing against my shirt, her presence steady against me. And I stayed too, content in the realization that sometimes the most profound connections aren't loud or rushed, they're quiet, slow, and undeniable. As I closed my eyes briefly, I thought of the words she'd first spoken, just one drink. She hadn't been wrong. It had been only one drink, but what poured between us was far stronger than anything in the glass.